My manager forced me to snitch on my coworkers by dangling a promotion over my head, knowing I needed it to afford life-saving medication for my daughter. My hands were shaking as I stared at the surveillance footage of Jenny taking her third bathroom break of the day. Jan had promised me the operations director position with a $15,000 raise if I could handle one special project. What she didn't mention was that the project involved spying on my own colleagues through our company's new AI monitoring system. My 7-year-old daughter Kira has type 1 diabetes, and without that promotion, we'd be choosing between rent and insulin within 2 months. Jan swept into our failing marketing firm like a corporate savior, polished expensive suits, perfect smile, and a resume that screamed overqualified for our tiny operation. She claimed our new AI productivity software would save the company, but something felt off about a struggling firm suddenly having a budget for advanced surveillance technology. The system tracked everything: keystroke patterns, bathroom breaks, all personal phone usage, even how long employees spent talking to each other. The mentorship started innocently enough. Coffee meetings where Jan shared corporate wisdom and made me feel like chosen family. Then came the first request, to document which colleagues seemed unmotivated. When I hesitated, she'd casually mention Kira's medical bills and how rare good opportunities were for single mothers. The promotion dangled just out of reach like a carrot keeping me compliant. Jan isolated me systematically. She scheduled my meetings during everyone else's lunch breaks. She labeled other employees as lacking commitment while praising my dedication. Soon I was eating alone watching surveillance data, while my former friends grabbed coffee without me. The worst part was how Jan made it feel normal, even necessary for company survival. The breaking point came when Jan demanded I skip my father's emergency heart surgery for a critical client presentation. I chose work over family, thinking it would prove my worth. 6 hours later, I discovered Jan had postponed the meeting by 2 days without telling me. She called it a loyalty test while my father recovered alone because I was sitting in an empty conference room. Guilt finally drove me to confide in Marcus from graphic design. His face went white when I described the monitoring system. He whispered about hearing identical stories from freelancers at other small companies where Jan had consulted. 3 specific business names, all with the same pattern of efficiency programs followed by mass employee departures. My research that night revealed the horrifying truth. Jan wasn't saving small businesses. She was systematically destroying them. The AI system collected behavioral data that she sold to larger marketing agencies. Those companies used the intelligence to poach clients from the very businesses Jan claimed to help. She targeted desperate owners who couldn't afford to lose their companies, exploiting their vulnerability and their employees' financial desperation. Every place Jan touched withered. Employees quit en masse after her programs launched. The promotion she offered me wasn't an opportunity. It was bait to make me complicit. She preyed on people like me who would do anything for their survival. This morning, Jan was waiting at my desk with that trademark smile, but her eyes had turned ice cold. An unmarked folder sat between us, containing printouts of my search history and screenshots of my text conversations with Marcus. She knew I'd been digging into her past and asking questions. Jan leaned against my cubicle wall and spoke in that same honey-sweet tone she'd used during our coffee meetings. She said we needed to discuss my commitment to her, and in turn, Kira's future. She asked if I truly understood what was at stake. The folder contained something else: employment termination papers, with my name already typed in. She was giving me one final choice: comply completely or lose everything, including Kira's insurance coverage. I stared at the termination papers, my mouth going dry. The timestamp on the document showed yesterday's date at 3:47 p.m., exactly when I'd been researching Jan's previous companies. She'd been watching me in real time, preparing for this moment before I'd even realized I was caught. Jan's manicured finger tapped the folder. She mentioned that she'd already spoken with HR about my performance issues, and they were prepared to process the termination immediately. The way she emphasized immediately made my stomach drop. Kira's next insulin shipment was due in 3 days. My phone buzzed. A text from the pharmacy asking about insurance verification for Kira's prescription. The timing couldn't have been coincidental. Jan's smile widened slightly as she watched me read the message. She pulled out another document from the folder, a non-disclosure agreement, dense with legal language. She explained that if I signed it and agreed to continue with this special project, everything would proceed smoothly. The promotion, the raise, Kira's insurance. All I had to do was stop asking questions and delete any research I'd gathered. The office felt smaller, the walls pressing in. Through the glass partition, I could see Jenny at her desk, oblivious to what was happening. Or maybe not oblivious. Maybe everyone already knew to stay away from me. Jan's phone rang. She answered it while maintaining eye contact with me. The conversation was brief, but I caught enough to understand. She was confirming a meeting with someone from our biggest client's company. The meeting was scheduled for tomorrow morning, right when I usually dropped Kira at school. She ended the call and casually mentioned that my attendance at tomorrow's meeting was mandatory. Missing it would be seen as abandoning my job responsibilities. The threat was clear without being stated directly. I tried to steady my breathing. The folder between us felt like a loaded weapon. Jan reached into her designer bag and pulled out a pen, setting it next to the NDA. The pen was heavy, expensive looking. Everything about her radiated control and preparation. Marcus walked past our cubicle area, his eyes darting toward us before quickly looking away. His whole body language screamed discomfort. Jan noticed and called out to him, asking about the freelance project he'd mentioned yesterday. Marcus froze, his face flushing as he stammered that he must have been mistaken about those other companies. The betrayal hit like a physical blow. Marcus had already folded. Jan must have gotten to him before coming to me. She'd orchestrated this entire morning like a chess master moving pieces into position. Jan turned her attention back to me. She mentioned that she'd noticed some concerning patterns in my productivity data. Extended bathroom breaks that coincided with personal phone calls. Time spent on non-work websites during business hours. All minor infractions that could be overlooked were compiled into a case for termination with cause. My hands trembled as I picked up the pen. Every instinct screamed at me to sign the NDA and protect Kira. But something in Jan's eyes, a glint of satisfaction, made me hesitate. She was enjoying this. This wasn't just business for her. The morning sun streaming through the office windows felt harsh and unforgiving. I could hear the hum of computers, the distant sound of the coffee machine, normal office sounds that now felt surreal given what was happening. Jan leaned back slightly, giving me space to think, or rather, space to feel the weight of my decision. She glanced at her phone, checking the time. She had other meetings, other employees to manage. I was just one piece in whatever game she was playing. I thought about the 3 companies Marcus had mentioned. How many other single parents had sat in this exact position? How many had signed similar documents, choosing their children's immediate needs over exposing Jan's operation? The NDA's text blurred as I tried to read it. Phrases jumped out: proprietary information, severe financial penalties, immediate termination. It was written to be intimidating, to make fighting back seem impossible. Jan's phone buzzed with a calendar reminder. She silenced it without looking, keeping her focus on me. She mentioned that HR was expecting an update within the hour. Either I'd be signing the NDA and continuing my employment, or they'd be processing my termination and final paycheck. The final paycheck. I did quick mental math. It might cover 1 month of Kira's medication if I stretched every dollar. After that, we'd be relying on emergency services and payment plans that would bury us in debt. I set the pen down. Jan's expression didn't change, but something shifted in her posture. She asked if I needed more time to consider my options. The word options felt like mockery when she'd systematically removed every alternative. She stood, smoothing her skirt. She said she'd give me 30 minutes to make my decision. After that, HR would proceed with whatever paperwork was necessary. She picked up the folder, leaving just the NDA and pen on my desk. As she walked away, her heels clicking on the floor, she paused. Without turning around, she mentioned that she'd had a lovely chat with Kira's teacher yesterday about the upcoming school fundraiser. The implicit threat chilled me more than anything else she'd said. I sat alone at my desk, staring at the NDA. Around me, the office continued its normal rhythm. Phones rang, keyboards clacked, people discussed weekend plans. None of them knew that my entire world was balanced on the edge of this decision. 25 minutes. That's all I had left to choose between my integrity and my daughter's health. The pen lay there, waiting. In the distance, I could see John in the conference room, already moving on to her next meeting. To her, this was just another Tuesday morning. My phone buzzed again. Another text from the pharmacy, this time warning that without insurance verification, they'd have to cancel the prescription order. My vision blurred, but I couldn't tell if it was tears or panic. I grabbed the pen with trembling fingers, but instead of signing, I stood up and walked toward the bathroom. My legs felt unsteady as I passed Jenny's desk. She glanced up briefly, then immediately looked away. The avoidance stung more than any confrontation would have. In the bathroom stall, I splashed cold cold water on my face and tried to think clearly. 20 minutes left. My phone vibrated with another pharmacy notification. This time it was an automated message stating that Kira's prescription would be canceled in 24 hours without valid insurance information. Back at my desk, Jan had returned. She'd brought reinforcements. Our HR director stood beside her, holding a manila envelope. The woman who'd always been friendly during company potlucks now wore an expression of professional detachment. Jan explained that HR needed to document my decision for company records. The HR director placed a voice recorder on my desk. She stated the date, time, and purpose of the meeting in a monotone voice. Jan produced a second copy of the NDA, explaining that one would be for my records. The preparation was meticulous, every detail planned. I noticed Marcus hovering near the water cooler, pretending to fill his bottle for the third time. His hands shook slightly as he avoided looking in our direction. Whatever Jan had done to flip him had been thorough. Jan's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and smiled. She mentioned that Kira's school had just confirmed receipt of updated emergency contact information. My blood ran cold. I hadn't authorized any changes to Kira's school records. The HR director shifted uncomfortably, clearly wanting this over with. She reminded me that the company needed a decision immediately due to pending client meetings. The pressure was mounting from every angle. I asked to see the evidence of my supposed performance issues. Jan's smile widened as she produced a thick folder. Inside were screenshots of every website I'd visited, timestamps of bathroom breaks, records of personal calls. The surveillance had been more comprehensive than I'd imagined, but there was more. Emails I'd sent months ago had been altered. Casual comments about coworkers had been edited to sound harsh and unprofessional. The manipulation was so subtle that proving the alterations would be nearly impossible. Jan mentioned that several employees had already provided statements about my concerning behavior. She didn't name names, but I could guess. People who needed their jobs as desperately as I needed mine. The clock on the wall showed 5 minutes left. Jan leaned forward and explained that this was a generous offer. Most employees in my position wouldn't get the chance to resign with benefits intact. The NDA would ensure a smooth transition for everyone. My phone rang. The caller ID showed Kira's school. My hand hesitated over the phone as Jan watched with interest. I answered to hear the school nurse explaining that Kira seemed upset and had mentioned that mommy might not be at pickup today. The manipulation was masterful. Jan had somehow planted seeds of doubt in my 7-year-old's mind. I assured the nurse I'd be there, but my voice cracked. Jan's expression remained neutral, but I caught a flicker of satisfaction. 3 minutes. The HR director tapped her watch. Jan mentioned that she'd need to leave soon for the client meeting. If I wasn't ready to commit to the company's future, she'd have to make alternate arrangements. I thought about my father, still recovering from surgery, about Kira's innocent face when she took her insulin shots without complaint, about the stack of medical bills growing on my kitchen counter. Every option led to loss. 2 minutes. Jan's phone buzzed again. This time she showed me the screen. It was a message from our biggest client, confirming tomorrow's meeting and specifically requesting my attendance. The trap was complete. 1 minute. The HR director started gathering her papers. Jan reached for the unsigned NDA. My hand moved without conscious thought, grabbing the pen. But instead of signing, I wrote 3 words across the top. I need time. Jan's expression hardened. She informed me that time was a luxury the company couldn't afford. Either I was committed to the team or I wasn't. There was no middle ground. The HR director looked between us, clearly uncomfortable with the tension. She suggested a brief recess, but Jan shut that down immediately. Decisions delayed were opportunities lost, she said. My desk phone rang. The caller ID showed our IT department. Jan nodded for me to answer. The IT manager informed me that my computer access would be restricted pending resolution of security concerns. I wouldn't be able to access any files or systems. The walls were closing in. Jan stood, smoothing her skirt again. She announced that she was disappointed but not surprised. Some people simply weren't cut out for leadership roles. The HR director would process the termination paperwork immediately. Panic flooded through me. I grabbed the NDA and pen, my hand moving to sign, but Jan held up a hand. The offer had expired. Now we would proceed with termination for cause, which meant no severance, no continuation of benefits, nothing. The HR director looked uncomfortable but said nothing. She'd clearly been briefed on this scenario. Jan mentioned that security would escort me out within the hour. I should use the time to gather personal items. Through the glass partition, I saw other employees pretending to work while stealing glances at our cubicle. The office grapevine would be buzzing within minutes. My professional reputation was being destroyed in real time. Jan's next words hit like a physical blow. She mentioned that she'd already been in touch with other marketing firms in the area. Word traveled fast in our industry. Finding another job would be challenging, especially with a termination for cause on my record. The HR director excused herself, mumbling about paperwork. Jan and I were left alone. She leaned against my desk, her voice dropping to a conversational tone. She said she was genuinely sorry it had come to this. She'd had such high hopes for our partnership. My computer screen went black. IT had already started restricting access. Years of work, contacts, and portfolio pieces were now locked away. Jan noticed my distress and mentioned that company property needed to remain secure. She pulled out her phone and showed me an email draft. It was addressed to our entire client list, explaining that I was no longer with the company due to performance and security concerns. One click and my professional network would evaporate. The manipulation was breathtaking in its thoroughness. Every avenue of escape had been calculated and blocked. Jan had played this game before, probably dozens of times. I was just the latest in a long line of desperate employees. My personal phone buzzed. A text from my landlord asking about next month's rent. The timing felt orchestrated, though I knew it couldn't be. Or could it? Had Jan's reach extended that far? Jan mentioned that she needed to prepare for tomorrow's client meeting. She suggested I start packing my desk. Security would arrive soon. As she turned to leave, she paused and looked back with what seemed like genuine curiosity. She asked if I understood now why compliance was so important, why fighting the system never worked, why smart people learn to adapt rather than resist. The question felt like a teaching moment, as if she was still mentoring me. I found my voice and asked about Kira's insulin. How was I supposed to afford it without insurance? Jan's expression softened slightly. She mentioned that there were programs for unemployed parents. The state could help. It would be difficult, but manageable. The casualness of her response revealed everything. She'd done this calculation before. She knew exactly how much pressure to apply, exactly when desperate parents would break. The system was designed to create compliance through desperation. Jenny appeared at my cubicle, her face flushed. She stammered an apology, saying she hadn't meant for things to go this far. Jan watched with interest as Jenny explained that she'd only answered HR's questions honestly. The betrayal from Jenny hurt more than Jan's manipulation. We'd shared lunch breaks, complained about deadlines, celebrated small victories. Now she stood there, choosing her job security over our friendship. Jan thanked Jenny for her honesty and integrity. She mentioned that the company valued employees who put the organization first. Jenny practically glowed under the praise, even as guilt flickered across her face. After they left, I sat alone in my cubicle, staring at the empty computer screen. Around me, the office hummed with nervous energy. Everyone knew something had happened, but no one approached. I'd become radioactive. My hands moved automatically, opening desk drawers and pulling out personal items. A photo of Kira at her last birthday party, a coffee mug she'd painted for me. Small reminders of why I'd endured so much. Security arrived faster than expected. 2 guards I'd never seen before stood at my cubicle entrance. They were polite but firm. I had 10 minutes to pack. They would escort me out through the back entrance. As I packed, I noticed Jan in the conference room, already running her next meeting. She didn't look up, didn't acknowledge what was happening. I was already history, a problem solved and forgotten. The security guards watched as I filled a small box with personal items. One of them mentioned that they'd need to check the contents before I left. Company policy, nothing proprietary could leave the building. My phone rang. Kira's school again. This time it was the principal. She expressed concern about the situation and wondered if we should schedule a meeting to discuss Kira's support needs. The speed at which Jan's influence had spread was terrifying. I assured the principal everything was fine, but my voice betrayed me. She mentioned that the school counselor was available if Kira needed someone to talk to. The implication was clear. I was now a parent under scrutiny. The 10 minutes passed quickly. The security guards checked my box, removing a notebook that might contain company information. They were thorough, but not unkind. They'd done this before. As we walked through the office, conversation stopped. People pretended to be absorbed in their screens. A few made eye contact, offering silent sympathy, but no one spoke up. No one risked their own position. Marcus was standing by the elevator when we reached it. He started to say something and then stopped. The security guard stepped between us. Personal contact with terminated employees was discouraged. Marcus retreated, his face a mask of guilt and relief. The elevator ride felt endless. The security guards flanked me, their presence making me feel like a criminal. We exited through the loading loading dock, avoiding the main lobby. Even my departure was designed to minimize disruption. Outside, the morning sun felt different, harsher, less forgiving. One security guard handed me my box while the other collected my badge and parking pass. They wished me luck, a hollow courtesy that stung more than silence would have. I sat in my car, box on the passenger seat, trying to process what had happened. In less than an hour, I'd gone from employed to terminated, from insured to desperate, from fighting back to completely defeated. My phone buzzed with emails. Word was already spreading. Former colleagues expressing shock, clients asking about transition plans. Each message, another reminder of how thoroughly Jan had orchestrated my downfall. The pharmacy called again. This time, it wasn't automated. A real person explained that without insurance verification by end of business today, Kira's prescription would be canceled. Did I have updated insurance information? I drove home in a daze, my mind racing through options. File for unemployment, apply for emergency medical assistance, update my resume, contact recruiters. Each task felt overwhelming when combined with the others. At home, I opened my laptop and started searching for jobs, but Jan had been thorough. My LinkedIn profile had been flooded with connection requests from suspicious accounts. My online reputation was being diluted with noise. I called the 3 companies Marcus had mentioned. The first 2 wouldn't take my call. The third listened politely, then explained they couldn't discuss former consultants due to legal agreements. Jan's web of NDAs protected her from every angle. The afternoon disappeared in a blur of applications and phone calls. Each rejection felt personal. Word had spread faster than I'd thought possible. Marketing firms that had recruited me months ago now wouldn't return my calls. Kira's school pickup time approached. I drove there early, needing to see her, to remind myself what mattered. But when I arrived, Jan's car was already in the visitor lot. My blood ran cold. I found her in the main office, chatting with the principal. She'd introduced herself as a concerned family friend, worried about my well-being. The principal looked uncomfortable, but was clearly buying the performance. Jan excused herself when she saw me, but the damage was done. The principal asked if I had a few minutes to talk about Kira, about ensuring stability during this difficult transition. The meeting I'd hoped to avoid was now inevitable. I collected Kira, who seemed unusually quiet. In the car, she asked why the nice lady from my work was at school, why she'd asked so many questions about mommy. The manipulation of my child made my hands shake with rage. At home, I tried to maintain normalcy, homework, dinner, bath time, but Kira sensed something was wrong. She asked if we were still going to have insurance for her medicine. 7 years old and already worried about healthcare. After bedtime, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop, diving deeper into Jan's history. But every search led to dead ends. Professional websites with glowing recommendations. No trace of the destroyed companies Marcus had mentioned. My phone rang. Unknown number. I answered to hear a familiar voice. The security guard from earlier, calling from his personal phone. He'd seen this pattern before. 5 terminations in 2 months, all following the same script. He couldn't say much, didn't want to risk his job, but he mentioned a name. A former employee who'd fought back and lost. Someone who might talk if approached carefully. A tiny crack in Jan's armor. I wrote down the name and number thanking him. He hung up quickly, probably already regretting the call, but it was something. A thread to pull. A possibility of exposing the truth. The next morning brought new challenges. Kira's insulin pump beeped, warning of low supplies. The pharmacy wouldn't fill the prescription without insurance. I'd have to pay out of pocket, depleting my savings in one transaction. At the pharmacy, I recognized another parent from Kira's school. She avoided eye contact, hurrying past. Word had spread beyond professional circles. I was becoming a pariah in every aspect of my life. The pharmacist took pity, offering a payment plan. But even with that, the numbers didn't work. Rent, utilities, food, medicine. Something would have to give. The mathematical certainty of poverty stretched before me. I called the former employee the security guard had mentioned. She answered cautiously, recognizing the desperation in my voice. We arranged to meet at a coffee shop far from the office. She had a story to tell. Her termination had followed the same pattern. Performance concerns, documentation, swift execution. But she'd fought back legally. The case had dragged on for months before she ran out of money. Jan's company had deeper pockets and better lawyers. She showed me documents from her case. Discovery had revealed the monitoring system's true capabilities. It went beyond productivity tracking. Personal emails, private messages, even health information, all collected and stored. But the legal system had failed her. The employment contracts we'd all signed included arbitration clauses. The surveillance was technically legal. The manipulation, while unethical, wasn't criminal. Jan operated in the gray areas where law and morality diverged. The woman warned me against fighting. She'd lost everything. Job, savings, reputation. Her marriage had crumbled under the stress. She'd moved to a different state to start over. Jan's influence was that thorough. I left the meeting more discouraged than before. Every avenue led to the same conclusion. Jan had built a perfect system for destroying lives while staying within legal boundaries. Fighting her meant sacrificing everything with no guarantee of success. Back home, I found an envelope taped to my door. Inside was a formal letter from a law firm. Jan was considering legal action for corporate espionage based on my unauthorized access to proprietary information. The threat was clear. Stop investigating or face lawsuits. That evening, Kira complained of feeling dizzy. Her blood sugar was off. The stress was affecting her management routine. I held her as she cried, promising everything would be okay. Lies that tasted bitter but necessary. My sister called, having heard about my termination through social media. She offered sympathy but no help. She had her own family, her own struggles. She suggested I consider Jan's original offer if it was still available. Pragmatism over principles. Sleep wouldn't come. I lay awake calculating scenarios. How long savings would last, which bills to skip, whether to sell the car. Each option led to the same place. Eventual surrender to a system designed to create compliance through desperation. The next morning, Jan appeared at Kira's school again. This time she was volunteering for the fundraiser she'd mentioned. Other parents greeted her warmly. She was establishing herself in my world, creating a narrative where she was stable and I was not. I confronted her in the parking lot. She remained calm, expressing concern for my well-being, loud enough for other parents to hear. She mentioned resources for unemployed single mothers, support groups for stress, each word carefully chosen to paint a picture. Kira's teacher pulled me aside after pickup. She'd noticed changes in Kira's behavior, more withdrawn, less engaged. She suggested involving the school counselor, another professional now monitoring my parenting. That night I made a decision. I called Jan's office, hoping to negotiate. Maybe there was still a way to salvage something. The receptionist said Jan was unavailable but would return my call. She never did. Instead, I received an email from the law firm. My inquiry was being interpreted as harassment. Any further contact would result in immediate legal action. Even surrender was no longer an option. I'd waited too long. Marcus texted late that night, a simple apology. He explained that Jan had evidence of freelance work he'd done using company resources. She'd threatened to report him, ruining his career. He'd had no choice but to cooperate. I understood his position even as I hated him for it. We were all trapped in our own ways. Jan had found each person's weakness and exploited it. Marcus chose his career. I chose my daughter. Neither choice felt like a victory. The pharmacy called again. Final notice. Without payment or insurance verification, they'd have to cancel Kira's prescription. I emptied my checking account to cover 1 month's supply. The math was simple. I had 30 days to find a solution. Online job applications disappeared into the void. Recruiters who'd pursued me months earlier now wouldn't return calls. My reputation preceded me everywhere. Jan's network was more extensive than I'd imagined. A former colleague reached out privately. She'd heard about my situation and wanted to help. But when she tried to recommend me for a position, her boss shut it down. Word had come from higher up. I was untouchable. The isolation was complete. Professional networks closed, social circles wary, even family keeping distance. Jan had orchestrated a perfect storm of destruction, all while maintaining plausible deniability. I started applying for jobs outside marketing, retail, food service, anything with health insurance. But even those applications stalled. Background checks revealed my termination for cause. References couldn't be verified. Every door closed before it opened. Kira noticed the changes. Fewer groceries, canceled activities. She stopped asking for things, becoming careful in that way children do when they sense scarcity. Her childhood was being stolen by circumstances beyond her control. One morning, I found Jan's business card in my mailbox. No note, just the card. A reminder of her presence, of her power, of how easily she could reach into my life whenever she chose. I drove past the office, torturing myself with glimpses of my former life. Through the windows, I could see colleagues at their desks. Jenny in my old cubicle, the world moving on without me. The security guard who'd helped me called again. Another termination had happened. Same pattern, same result. He was thinking of quitting before he became a target. The fear was spreading through the office like a virus. I reached out to a labor attorney, hoping for options. The consultation was discouraging. Without evidence of illegal activity, there was no case. The Surveillance was legal. The termination followed procedure. Ethics and legality were different things. The attorney mentioned class action possibilities if enough former employees came forward, but that would take years, money I didn't have, and courage others had lost. Jan had calculated every angle. 2 weeks into unemployment, the final notices started arriving. Electricity, water, phone. Each bill a ticking clock. I sold jewelry, electronics, anything valuable. Each sale buying days, not solutions. Kira's school called about unpaid lunch fees. Small embarrassments piling up. I packed lunches instead, stretching groceries further. She never complained, but I saw her watching other kids buy treats. My car broke down on the way to a job interview. The repair estimate exceeded my remaining savings. I took the bus home, another interview missed, another opportunity lost to circumstances. That night, I considered calling Jan directly, begging for mercy, offering complete surrender if she'd just let me work somewhere, anywhere. Pride seemed like a luxury I could no longer afford, but I remembered the former employee's warning. Jan didn't negotiate with the defeated. She'd already won. Reaching out would only provide more evidence of instability, more ammunition for the narrative she'd created. Instead, I focused on survival. Food banks, assistance programs, anywhere that might help. The system designed to help people like me was overwhelmed, underfunded, full of cracks to fall through. A neighbor mentioned seeing Jan at a community business meeting. She was consulting for another small company. The cycle continuing, fresh victims who didn't know what was coming. I wanted to warn them, but knew they wouldn't listen. 3 weeks in, I received a call from Child Protective Services. Someone had reported concerns about Kira's welfare. The investigation was routine, they assured me, just checking in, but I knew who'd made the call. The social worker visited our apartment. She noted the sparse groceries, the overdue bills, the stress evident in both our faces. She was kind but thorough. Another professional now monitoring my parenting. Kira handled the visit with heartbreaking maturity. She showed the social worker her homework, her clean room, her medicine routine. 7 years old and already learning to perform stability she didn't feel. The social worker left satisfied but promised follow-up visits. Another sword hanging over our heads. Another way John's influence extended into our lives. The manipulation was masterful in its indirectness. That night, Kira asked if we were going to be okay. I held her close, smelling her shampoo, feeling her small heart hit. I promised we would be, though I had no idea how to make that true. My father called from his recovery facility. He'd heard about my job loss and wanted to help, but his pension barely covered his medical expenses. We were both drowning in different ways. I started a blog documenting Jan's methods. Anonymous, careful, factual. Maybe if enough people read it, someone would investigate, but it gained no traction. SEO buried it beneath Jan's professional accolades. A month after termination, the inevitable arrived. Eviction notice, 30 days to vacate. The landlord was sympathetic but had bills too. The dominoes Jan had set up were falling in perfect sequence. I called every contact, every acquaintance, every distant connection, looking for work, for help, for anything. Most calls went unanswered. Those who responded offered sympathy, but no solutions. One night, packing boxes I couldn't afford, I found the photo from Kira's last birthday, before January, before the surveillance, when we were poor but stable. The contrast was devastating. Kira helped pack without complaint. She carefully wrapped her few toys, her school awards, her diabetes supplies. Children shouldn't have to be this resilient, this careful with their childhood. My sister finally offered her couch, temporarily, until I got back on my feet. The conditions were clear. Find work quickly. Don't disrupt her family. Be grateful for what was given. The move was scheduled for next week. Leaving the city meant leaving any chance of fighting Jan. She'd won completely. I'd been erased from professional existence and pushed to the margins of survival. But something shifted as I packed our life into boxes. The fear that had paralyzed me began transforming. Into what? I wasn't sure. But Jan had made one miscalculation. She'd left me with nothing left to lose. I discovered Jan's operation was technically legal under current employment law. Everything she'd done fell within the bounds of legitimate business consulting. The AI monitoring, the data collection, even the systematic destruction of careers operated in legal gray areas that favored employers. My investigation methods, however, had crossed multiple lines. The realization hit me during a sleepless night researching employment law, breaking into company systems, accessing private emails, recording conversations without consent. Every action I'd taken to expose Jan constituted actual crimes while her manipulation remained merely unethical. The irony burned. My desperate gambit involved returning to the office building at night. Using Jan's own security codes that I'd memorized during our meetings, I slipped inside during maintenance hours. The cleaning crew barely glanced at me, assuming I was working late like so many others trapped in Jan's web. The server room hummed with electronic life. My hands shook as I accessed the main terminal using credentials I'd obtained through manipulation. Each keystroke deepened my criminal liability, but Kira's empty insulin vials drove me forward. The evidence had to exist somewhere in these databases. What I found exceeded my worst fears. Jan's data collection operation affected dozens of employees across multiple companies. Behavioral patterns, personal communications, health information, family details, all meticulously cataloged and cross-referenced. The scope was staggering, but entirely legal under the employment contracts we'd all signed. I copied everything onto a flash drive, knowing the evidence was inadmissible in any court. Illegally obtained proof meant nothing to the justice system, but maybe public exposure would matter. Maybe shame where law failed. The security guard who'd helped me appeared in the doorway. His face showed resignation rather than surprise. He mentioned that he'd already submitted his 2 weeks notice. The pattern was too clear, the writing on the wall. He walked away without reporting me, his own small act of rebellion. Back home, I spread the evidence across my kitchen table. Printouts, screenshots, data logs. The proof of Jan's systematic destruction lay before me, worthless in any legal sense. My crimes in obtaining it, however, were prosecutable. I played directly into her hands. Child Protective Services called the next morning. My interview was scheduled for that afternoon. The social worker mentioned new concerns raised about my mental state and decision-making. Someone had reported seeing me at the office building after hours, behaving erratically. At the CPS office, I faced questions about my employment status, living situation, and ability to provide stable care for Kira. The social worker showed genuine concern but followed strict protocols. My answers sounded hollow even to my own ears. Unemployed, facing eviction, under investigation for corporate espionage. The facts painted their own picture. Kira's teacher submitted a report noting changes in her behavior and academic performance. The school counselor added observations about emotional distress. Each professional assessment added weight to the case building against me. Jan's manipulation had turned every support system into surveillance. The meeting with the principal that afternoon went worse than expected. She presented a file of documented concerns dating back weeks, missed pickup times that never happened, behavioral incidents that didn't match Kira's personality. The reports were subtle enough to seem plausible, but false enough to destroy credibility. I realized then that fighting John had transformed me into exactly what she'd claimed, an unstable parent whose obsession endangered their child. Every action taken to protect Kira had been twisted into evidence of unfitness. The trap was perfect in its cruel simplicity. That evening, Kira asked why everyone kept asking her questions about home. Her innocent confusion broke something inside me. My 7-year-old was being interrogated about our life, turned into an unwitting informant against her own mother. The violation of her childhood felt worse than any professional destruction. The eviction proceedings accelerated when the landlord received notice of my legal troubles. Suddenly, a month became 2 weeks. Housing discrimination was illegal, but proving it required resources I didn't have. Another door closing through perfectly legal means. My sister called with conditions for staying with her. Background check required. No visitors. Strict curfew. Contributing to household expenses immediately. Her home, her rules. The charity came wrapped in restrictions that felt like another form of control. I spent the night organizing our possessions into 2 categories: essential and everything else. Kira's medical supplies, a few clothes, important documents. The rest would go to storage I couldn't afford or simply disappear. Material possessions seemed meaningless against the loss of autonomy. The next morning brought the inevitable. Jan appeared at Kira's school for the parent-teacher conference. She'd listed herself as an emergency contact and concerned family friend. Her presence was legal, her concern seemingly genuine. Other parents saw a successful professional worried about a struggling family. During the conference, both Jan and I sat across from Kira's teacher. The dynamic was surreal. My tormentor playing the role of supportive colleague while I struggled to maintain composure. Every word I spoke sounded defensive against her calm rationality. The teacher expressed concerns about Kira's stability given the recent upheavals. Jan nodded sympathetically, mentioning resources for families in crisis. She offered to help coordinate support services, her generosity noted by school administrators. The performance was flawless. Kira's sudden diabetic episode during the conference changed everything. Her blood sugar crashed dramatically, sending us racing to the emergency room. In that moment, all pretense fell away. Both Jan and I focused solely on the child whose life hung in the balance. The hospital waiting room became neutral ground. Jan handled insurance questions with efficiency while I comforted Kira. For those terrifying hours, we were simply two adults united by concern for a sick child. The humanity in her response made the cruelty of her campaign even harder to comprehend. Medical records revealed the truth. Jan's interference with insurance had delayed critical medication deliveries. The irregular insulin supply had destabilized Kira's condition. The evidence was clear, documented, actionable. A medical malpractice attorney would salivate over the case, but pursuing legal action meant prolonging the conflict. More investigations, more scrutiny, more trauma for Kira. The choice crystallized with brutal clarity. Justice for myself or stability for my daughter. The decision was no decision at all. I made the choice that every parent would make. In the hospital cafeteria, I told Jan I was done fighting. No more investigations, no more evidence gathering, no more resistance. Complete surrender in exchange for being left alone to rebuild our lives. Jan's response surprised me. She looked tired, older somehow. She admitted that my investigation had damaged her consulting business. Clients were asking questions, other employees were talking. The perfect system showed cracks. We'd both lost more than we'd gained. The terms were simple. I would destroy all evidence and sign a comprehensive NDA. She would withdraw all legal threats and ensure no further interference with my job search. Mutual destruction held in check by mutual agreement. Neither victory nor vindication, just exhausted compromise. Signing the papers felt like death and rebirth simultaneously. Everything I'd fought for evaporated with my signature. But Kira's insurance was reinstated within hours. The CPS investigation closed due to lack of substantive concerns. The eviction was withdrawn. Survival came at the cost of silence. 3 weeks later, I started a job at a small nonprofit. The pay barely covered expenses, but the health insurance was comprehensive. No surveillance systems, no manipulation, just honest work for modest wages. It felt like breathing again after months underwater. Kira's health stabilized with consistent medication. Her grades improved. The questions stopped. Childhood returned in small increments. Though innocence once lost, never fully returns. We both carried invisible scars from Jan's war. Marcus reached out months later. Jan's consulting firm had quietly dissolved. Too many questions, too much attention. She'd moved on to another city, another industry. The cycle would continue elsewhere, but our small victory was forcing her to start over. The office building looked different when I drove past. New management had eliminated the AI monitoring system. Former colleagues were slowly rebuilding trust. Jenny had transferred to another department. The workplace would never be the same, but it was healing. My father recovered fully from his surgery. We rebuilt our relationship slowly, acknowledging the damage my choices had caused. He understood the impossible position I'd been in, but mourned the moments lost. Some wounds time heals, others simply scar over. The blog I'd started gained traction slowly. Other victims found it, shared their stories. A quiet network of survivors grew. We couldn't seek legal justice, but we could warn others. Each story shared might prevent another family's destruction. 6 months after everything ended, I received an unexpected package. Inside was a single photo of Kira from her school's spring concert. No note, no return address, but I recognized Jan's handwriting on the envelope, a reminder that she still watched, still knew where to find us. The message was clear. The truce held only as long as both parties honored it. Mutual assured destruction in corporate form. I burned the photo and focused on the life we'd salvaged from the wreckage. Kira thrived in our new normal. Smaller apartment, simpler life, but consistent medical care and emotional stability. She stopped asking about the nice lady from mommy's work. Children adapt faster than adults. Their resilience both heartbreaking and hopeful. The nonprofit job offered unexpected satisfaction. No ladder to climb, no promotions to chase. Just meaningful work for fair compensation. I discovered peace in the absence of ambition, finding worth beyond corporate metrics. Other parents at school remained distant but civil. The whisper network had marked me as trouble, but time dulled the stigma. We existed on the margins of social circles, neither included nor explicitly excluded. It was enough. My sister and I repaired our relationship gradually. She'd seen me at my worst and chosen family over justice. I couldn't fault her for protecting her own children, even as I mourned the support withheld. Family meant accepting imperfection. The financial recovery took years. Debt accumulated during unemployment, legal fees, medical costs. Each month meant careful choices, strategic sacrifices. But we never missed another insulin payment. Priorities crystallized through crisis. I learned that justice isn't always possible. Sometimes survival is victory enough. Jan remained free, her methods intact, her next victims unaware, but she'd lost our city, our industry. Small victories in an unfair world. The story spread quietly through professional networks, not through viral posts or media coverage, but whispered warnings at coffee meetings. Watch for the polished consultant with the perfect smile. Guard your data. Protect your people. Question the surveillance. Kira asked me once why we'd moved, why everything changed. I told her sometimes people make choices that hurt others, and sometimes we have to choose safety over fairness. She accepted it with the wisdom children show when they trust their parents' love, if not their explanations. The ending wasn't clean or satisfying. No dramatic confrontation, no public vindication, no systemic change. Just two broken people agreeing to stop breaking each other. Jan moved on to new hunting grounds. I moved on to simpler dreams. But Kira was healthy. We had insurance, we had stability. In the calculation of what mattered most, that was everything. The price of that security was silence about crimes that weren't quite crimes, about destruction that was perfectly legal. Some nights I wondered about Jan's next targets, the single parents, the desperate employees, the people who would choose survival over principles. I joined the ranks of those who knew but couldn't speak, another silent witness to legal cruelty. The flash drive with evidence sat in a safety deposit box. Insurance against future contact. Mutual assured destruction preserved through encrypted files and signed agreements. Modern corporate warfare fought with NDAs instead of weapons. We found peace in the ordinary. School pickups without surveillance. Bedtime stories without calculating insulin costs. Weekend trips to the park without checking for familiar cars. Freedom felt like the absence of fear rather than the presence of joy. The nonprofit expanded, offering me a small raise. Nothing like the operations director position John had dangled, but honest advancement for honest work. I celebrated quietly, remembering when ambition had nearly cost everything. Kira graduated to an insulin pump, a technological advance we couldn't have afforded before. She managed it with the competence of a child who'd learned too young that health required vigilance. Her strength amazed and saddened me equally. The last time I saw John was at a professional conference 2 years later. She was presenting on innovative consulting methods to an eager audience. Our eyes met across the room. She nodded slightly. I left without attending her session. Some knowledge comes too expensive to share. The war was over. Neither won, both lost. Kira survived. In the end, that was the only victory that mattered. Not justice, not vindication, not exposure. Just a little girl with diabetes who needed her medicine and got it.